Hey everyone! Today we're diving into async/await in JavaScript. By the end of this tutorial, you'll understand how to write clean, modern asynchronous code that's easier to read and maintain than traditional callbacks or promises. Before we dive into async/await, let's understand what asynchronous programming is. Asynchronous programming allows your code to perform tasks in the background without blocking the main thread. This means your application can keep running while waiting for operations like fetching data from a server or reading files to complete. Before async/await, we used callbacks. But callbacks can lead to something called callback hell, where you have multiple nested callbacks. This makes your code hard to read and maintain, and it's easy to lose track of what's happening. Promises were introduced to solve this problem. Promises provide a cleaner way to handle asynchronous operations. They flatten the code structure, making it easier to read and maintain. You can chain operations together and handle errors more effectively. Now let's talk about async/await. Async/await is syntactic sugar over promises that makes asynchronous code look and behave more like synchronous code. This makes your code cleaner, easier to read, and simpler to maintain. Let's look at a basic async function. Here we have a function called fetchData. The async keyword before the function declaration tells JavaScript that this function contains asynchronous operations. Inside the function, we use the await keyword to pause execution until the promise resolves. When we call this async function, it returns a promise. We can use .then to handle the resolved value and .catch to handle any errors that might occur. For better error handling, we can wrap our await statements in a try/catch block. This allows us to catch and handle any errors that might occur during the asynchronous operations. Sometimes you need to run multiple asynchronous operations in parallel. We can use promise.all to run them simultaneously and wait for all of them to complete before continuing. You can also implement timeouts for your asynchronous operations. Here we're using the abort controller API to cancel the fetch request if it takes too long. Let's look at a real-world example. Imagine you're building a login system. You would first validate the credentials, then make an API call to authenticate the user, and finally handle the response. Async/await makes this flow much cleaner and easier to understand. Another common use case is file uploads. You would read the file, upload it to a server, and then handle the response. Async/await makes this process much more straightforward. Let's compare the three approaches. Callbacks are the oldest and most problematic, with deeply nested code. Promises improve this with a flattened structure but still require .then and .catch. Async/await takes it further with synchronous-like syntax that's much easier to read and maintain. One common mistake is forgetting to use the await keyword. If you don't use await, the function will return a promise instead of the actual data. This can lead to unexpected behavior in your code. Another common mistake is not handling errors properly. If you don't use try/catch, any errors that occur will cause your application to crash. Always make sure to handle errors in your async functions. Here's a pro tip. Always use async/await with try/catch blocks to handle errors properly. This makes your code more robust and prevents unexpected crashes. Another tip is to use promise.all when you need to run multiple asynchronous operations in parallel. This can significantly improve the performance of your application. When naming your async functions, make sure to include words like fetch, load, or get to indicate that they're asynchronous operations. This helps other developers understand your code more quickly. That's it for today's tutorial. Let's quickly recap what we've learned. Async/await makes asynchronous code look and behave more like synchronous code. Always remember to use the await keyword with async functions. Handle errors properly with try/catch blocks. And use promise.all when you need to run multiple operations in parallel. If you found this tutorial helpful, Please like and subscribe for more JavaScript tutorials.